In the mid-1950s, the world still moved at a slower pace. Air travel existed, of course, but the sky belonged to propeller aircraft, machines that vibrated, shuddered, and droned through the atmosphere at modest speeds. A transatlantic flight meant half a day in the air. Passengers stepped off tired, rattled, and often airsick. Aviation was still glamorous, but it was limited, expensive, and often uncomfortable. The world felt impossibly large. Yet behind the scenes, a quiet revolution was brewing. Engineers were dreaming of a new kind of machine, a sleek white arrow that could carve across the sky at unheard of speeds. A machine powered not by pistons, but by the raw, thrilling rush of jet engines. It was both a dream and a gamble, and the risk was enormous. But if it worked, it would collapse distances, unite continents, and redefine what it meant to travel. At the center of that revolution was the airplane that would become the Boeing 707. Its story begins not on a sunny runway, but inside the massive Boeing factories of Seattle, where draftsmen bent over blueprints, slide rulers clicked, and the smell of metal and hydraulic fluid hung in the air. Boeing was known for military bombers like the B-17, B-29, and B-52, but building a jet-powered passenger aircraft was something completely different. The company was betting its future on something experimental, something radical. They called it the Dash 80. The Dash 80 wasn't just a prototype, it was a declaration. Boeing invested tens of millions, money it didn't really have, into a jetliner that no airline had even asked for. At the time, this was considered madness. Airlines insisted passengers would never trust jets. Too fast, too untested, too futuristic. But Boeing believed otherwise. They believed the future needed to be created, not waited for. On July 15, 1954, test pilot Alvin Tex Johnston took the Dash 80 into the sky. As its engines thundered and the aircraft lifted away from the runway, witnesses could sense immediately that aviation had just changed. The Dash 80 climbed faster, smoother, and more powerfully than any transport aircraft that had come before. It moved like a different species, but the world still wasn't convinced. The turning point arrived a year later during the 1955 Gold Cup hydroplane races at Lake Washington. It was supposed to be a polite demonstration flyby in front of airline executives and the public. Instead, Tex Johnston did something that would enter aviation legend forever. At 400 miles per hour, he pulled the Dash 80 into a full barrel roll. Then, with the crowd still screaming, he rolled it again. Thousands of onlookers stared, mouths open, as a huge four-engine jetliner performed acrobatic maneuvers normally reserved for nimble fighters. Boeing executives were horrified. Legend says one of them shouted, "My God, he's going to kill himself!" But the Dash 80 came out of the roll perfectly level, stable, confident. Tex Johnston simply said, it wasn't a stunt. It was proving the airplane, and he had proven it. The world suddenly wanted jets. From this moment, the Boeing 707 was inevitable. Pan American World Airways, Pan Am, became the launch customer, led by the visionary Juan Trippe. Trippe didn't just see the 707 as a new airplane, he saw it as the key to unlocking global travel on a scale humanity had never experienced. His ambition was breathtaking. He wanted to make the world accessible, affordable, and connected. And he knew the 707 was the tool that would make this happen. On October 1958, Pan Am launched the first commercial 707 service from New York to Paris. Crowds gathered at the airport. Newspapers all over the world printed headlines. Passengers boarded, knowing they were about to experience something new. The flight lasted just under 7 hours, almost half the time of the fastest propeller aircraft. Reporters wrote breathlessly about the smoothness, the speed, the lack of vibration, the excitement of roaring into the sky at nearly 600 miles an hour. Humanity felt the planet shrink beneath them. For the first time in history, it became normal to wake up in America and go to bed in Europe. Business changed. Culture changed, diplomacy changed. Families separated by oceans could visit one another in a single day. The 707 wasn't just a plane, it was a bridge across the world. The aircraft itself was a marvel of engineering. Its swept wings, angled sharply back, were designed for high-speed cruise at altitudes above most weather systems. Its 4 jet engines offered unprecedented thrust and reliability. Inside the cockpit, the 707 demanded teamwork and precision. Pilots operated banks of analog instruments, altimeters, attitude indicators, engine gauges, navigation radios, all while communicating with flight engineers who managed fuel, hydraulics, and electrical systems. It was a machine that rewarded skill. Pilots often said it felt alive under their hands. Powerful, responsive, eager. Boeing refined and upgraded the design repeatedly. The 707-120 opened the era. The 707-320 extended range, allowing longer routes. The 707-420 introduced quieter, more efficient turbofan engines. Luxury variants, convertible cargo versions, and special mission adaptations followed. But no matter the model, the silhouette stayed iconic. Flying on a 707 during the 1960s was an experience like no other. Passengers dressed in suits, cocktail dresses, and jewelry. Being seen boarding a 707 meant you had arrived, literally and socially. The cabin was wide, bright, and filled with the aroma of real meals prepared on board. Flight attendants, dressed in stylish uniforms, served cocktails, caviar, carved meats, and champagne. Airlines advertised the 707 with pride. Travel posters showed it racing across continents. Hollywood stars posed beside its gleaming fuselage. Government leaders held press conferences on its stairs. The jet age was not just about efficiency, it was about glamour, aspiration, and possibility. Before the 707, flying was a luxury for the elite. After the 707, it became the dream of everyone. Beyond commercial service, the 707 transformed global military aviation. The KC-135 tanker, developed from the 707's design, became the backbone of U.S. air refueling forces. Generations of fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance aircraft owe their missions to KC-135 refuelings. Many still fly today, more than 60 years later. Other offspring of the 707 became surveillance aircraft, airborne command posts, and intelligence platforms. The E-3 Sentry AWACS, with its unmistakable rotating radar dome, traces its DNA straight back to the 707 airframe. Even the US president flew aboard 707-based aircraft. Every flight labeled Air Force One from the Kennedy era through George H.W. Bush was a 707 derivative. These aircraft carried leaders through crises, negotiations, and historic moments, often becoming the stage on which world-changing decisions were made. The 707 wasn't just moving passengers, it was moving history. But aviation evolves relentlessly. In 1969, Boeing unveiled an aircraft even more ambitious, the 747, the jumbo jet. With its double-deck hump and massive wingspan, the 747 dwarfed the 707. It could carry 2 or 3 times as many passengers, fly farther, and offer airlines unparalleled economies of scale. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10 and Lockheed TriStar soon followed, along with the Airbus A300. A new war had begun, the wide-body revolution. Compared to these giants, the 707 began to look small. New regulations demanded quieter engines, and newer jets offered far better fuel efficiency. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, airlines began retiring their 707s, replacing them with 747s, 767s, and eventually the 777. Even so, the 707 continued serving smaller airlines, cargo operators, and militaries around the world well into the 2000s. The 707 faded from the front lines, but it never disappeared. Every modern Boeing carries its DNA. The 737, Born from 707 research, the 757 and 767 built on its aerodynamic foundations. The 777, a spiritual descendant in long-range innovation. The Dreamliner, the culmination of lessons that started with the Dash 80. More importantly, the 707 reshaped civilization. It accelerated the global economy. It turned tourism into a worldwide industry. It enabled international business and diplomacy. It expanded migration and cultural exchange. It allowed families across continents to stay connected. It changed the very pace of life. Millions of people, perhaps hundreds of millions, took their first jet flight in a 707. For many, that moment was life-changing. The roar of the engines, the unbelievable acceleration, the ground falling away, and the thrill of seeing the world from above for the first time. Today, only a handful of 707s still fly, most in military or specialized roles. A few sit proudly in museums, restored to their original glory. Their polished aluminum, swept wings, and tall tail still command respect. They stand not as relics, but as monuments to human ambition. Occasionally, somewhere in the world, one of them still comes to life. The engines spin, the turbines growl, the deep, thunderous roar fills the air. The smell of jet fuel and nostalgia mingles with the wind. And as the aircraft lifts off, steady, graceful, powerful, you aren't just watching metal climb into the sky. You're watching the birth of the modern world echo across time. The Boeing 707 shrank the planet. It turned oceans into ours. It turned continents into neighbors. It turned the world from distant and vast into something connected, reachable, shared. It wasn't simply an airplane. It was a revolution that changed how humanity travels, how humanity communicates, and how humanity understands itself. The 707 remains one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century, a machine that inspired generations, carried the dreams of millions, and launched the jet age. It shrank the world, it connected humanity, and it showed us the future.